Eli couldn't believe what had just happened. He stood frozen, holding his shirt in his hands. While Lena, the CEO he had always seen as untouchable, serious, and distant, stood before him, awkward and embarrassed, he could feel his heart pounding, not out of fear, but out of sheer surprise. He had never expected to see someone like her in such a vulnerable state. The normally polished and commanding woman was now holding his shirt in a way that made her look almost childlike. And he couldn't help but notice the slight tremble in her hands. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of the office around them felt strange and almost intrusive. Eli could hear distant footsteps and the faint ringing of phones. Yet it felt like the world had shrunk into that small changing room. Lena's eyes flicked nervously to the door, then back to him. And he could tell she was weighing her next words carefully. "I'm really sorry," she finally said, her voice low and uncertain. "I didn't mean to. To use your shirt, I had no other option." Eli's mind was racing. His first instinct was to apologize, to tell her it was fine, but something about the way she said it made him pause. She wasn't defensive or commanding. She wasn't pretending to be perfect or untouchable. She sounded small, almost fragile, like she'd carried a weight nobody knew about, and that weight had just grown too heavy for one morning. It's okay," he managed to say, trying to keep his voice steady. "Really, it's just a shirt." She looked at him, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe he wasn't angry. A faint sigh of relief escaped her, and for a moment Eli could see a crack in the mask she usually wore so well. It was brief, almost fleeting, but it was enough for him to realize that she was human, just like everyone else. "I have to ask you something," Lena said hesitantly, her fingers fiddling with the hem of the shirt. "Please don't tell anyone about this." "Not the staff, not anyone." Eli nodded immediately. "Of course. Don't worry. Your secret's safe with me?" She gave a small, almost shy smile, and for a moment she looked like she had been carrying something heavy and had finally been able to set it down, even if just a little. "Thank you," she whispered, almost to herself. Then she added more firmly, "I had an emergency. I spilled coffee on my blouse and I couldn't go home or wait for a replacement. I just grabbed your shirt. I hope it's not too much trouble." Eli shook his head, trying to keep the awkwardness from showing. "No, really. It's fine. It's just a shirt. I'm happy to help." She looked at him for a long moment, as if she were studying him, trying to figure out if he really meant it. Finally, she nodded, and he could see the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. I appreciate that." More than I can say. There was something in her tone that told Eli there was more beneath the surface. It's more than just a spilled coffee and a borrowed shirt. He didn't want to press her, but he couldn't help feeling curious. Why did someone like her, who seemed so untouchable, so powerful and controlled, suddenly feel so exposed and vulnerable in front of him? Eli thought back to the few times he had seen her in meetings or during company events. She had always seemed untouchable, almost cold, always in control. No one dared approach her without a purpose. And yet here she was, standing in a small changing room, trembling slightly, asking for a simple act of kindness. It was strange, almost surreal, and it stirred something in him. I hope everything is okay," he said carefully. You seem, I don't know, shaken." Lena's lips pressed together, and she looked away for a moment, her eyes scanning the room as if looking for answers in the walls. Then she exhaled slowly and looked back at him. "It's complicated," she admitted. "It's not just the coffee. I've been dealing with a lot, and this morning just pushed me over the edge." Eli nodded slowly, not wanting to intrude, but wanting to show that he was listening. He had learned long ago as a single dad that sometimes people just needed someone to hear them, without judgment, without rushing to fix things. "I get that," he said gently. "Some mornings just throw everything at you, and you have to handle it the best you can." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, exactly like that. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. I try to be strong, to be in control all the time, but sometimes it's just too much." Eli's heart softened. He had faced plenty of hard mornings himself, juggling work, bills, and caring for his son. And he could feel a kind of connection forming, even in this brief, awkward moment. "I understand," he said sincerely. "We all have those days. You don't always have to be perfect. Nobody is perfect." Her eyes met his, and he saw a glimmer of something he hadn't expected. Gratitude, vulnerability, maybe even relief. It was strange and humbling to realize that this powerful, distant woman had moments just like anyone else. Moments when she needed a little help. Moments when she was human. Thank you," she whispered again, her voice quieter now, almost lost in the small space of the room. "You didn't have to be understanding. Most people, they wouldn't be." Eli smiled softly, trying to ease her embarrassment. "I think most people are too busy to notice, honestly. But sometimes, kindness is just noticing someone who's struggling and helping them in a small way. Today, that's me, and I'm glad I could help." She looked down at the shirt she was wearing, tugging at it awkwardly. "It's comfortable," she said, a hint of a smile forming on her lips. "More than I expected, I guess. Sometimes the smallest things can make a difference." Eli felt a warmth spread through him. He had never imagined that something as simple as lending a shirt could have such an impact on someone like Lena. It was a reminder that even small acts of kindness could carry weight. Even with people who seemed untouchable, they stood there for a few more moments, neither wanting to break the fragile connection forming in that awkward, quiet space. Outside, the office continued its busy rhythm. But inside the changing room, time seemed to slow down. Eli realized he was witnessing a side of Lena that few, if any, had ever seen. A side that was human, vulnerable, and in need of empathy. Finally, Lena took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. "I should go," she said softly. "Thank you again. I really appreciate this." Eli nodded, holding the shirt carefully. "Any time," he said simply. "You don't have to worry about it." As she left the room, Eli watched her go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him. He felt proud in a quiet way that he had been able to help someone so powerful and usually untouchable. But he also felt curious, a quiet intrigue about the life she led and the struggles she faced behind the polished exterior. For the rest of the day, he couldn't shake the image of her standing there, embarrassed and vulnerable, wearing his shirt. It was a reminder that everyone, no matter how strong or important they seemed, carried hidden burdens. And it made him think about his own life, about the mornings when he felt overwhelmed, about the moments when he wished someone would just notice and care. Eli returned to his work, but his mind kept drifting back to that brief encounter. He found himself smiling at the memory, feeling a strange connection to Lena that went beyond titles and positions. It was a human connection, simple and genuine, formed in an unexpected moment of vulnerability and kindness. By the time the day ended, Eli realized that something subtle had shifted. He no longer saw Lena only as the distant CEO. He saw her as a person who, like him, faced challenges, felt fear, and needed help sometimes. And he felt honored that he had been the one to offer a small comfort. Even if it was just a borrowed shirt on a chaotic morning as he left the office, carrying his own bag and thoughts, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Life had a way of surprising him, of showing him moments of connection in the most unexpected places. And today, in that small changing room, he had been part of one of those moments, a moment that he knew would stay with him for a long time. Eli didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if he would see Lena again in such a personal, human way. But he knew that this encounter had opened a door in understanding that even the strongest, most distant people sometimes needed simple kindness and empathy. And for him, as a single dad trying to navigate life and parenthood, it was a lesson he would carry forward. Everyone has their struggles, and a small act of compassion could make a difference that nobody might ever forget. Eli couldn't stop thinking about Lena after that morning in the changing room. There was something about the way she had looked at him, a mixture of embarrassment and relief, that made him feel like he had glimpsed a side of her nobody usually saw. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, wondering what it must be like to carry so much pressure and responsibility every single day. A few days passed, and things at work returned to their usual rhythm. Eli continued with his tasks, helping customers, attending meetings, and keeping his routines with his son at home. But even in the midst of the ordinary, His thoughts drifted to Lena. He noticed small changes around the office, too. Colleagues whispered about her, mentioning that she seemed different, softer, less rigid than before. But no one could put their finger on why. It was as if she had quietly shifted and only a few had caught the subtle change. Then one afternoon, Eli received a message on his work phone. It was from the company number, but it wasn't anything official. The message simply said, "Can you come to my office for a moment?" It was brief, almost casual, but Eli's stomach tightened. He knew it was from Lena. He hesitated for a second, unsure if he should go. Meeting the CEO was intimidating, even under normal circumstances. But after the changing room incident, it felt different. There was no tension, no judgment in her voice, before only vulnerability. And yet, there was also curiosity. What did she want to talk about now? Eli decided to go. He took a deep breath, straightened his shirt, and walked down the long hallway toward her office. The office itself was sleek and polished, filled with glass walls and modern furniture. Sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow across the room. Lena was there, sitting behind her large desk, looking up as he entered. "Come in," she said softly, her voice carrying the same quiet tone that had caught him off guard in the changing room. "Have a seat." Eli nodded and pulled up a chair, trying to appear calm even though his mind was racing. He noticed how her hands rested on the desk, fingers intertwined, and how her eyes, usually sharp and commanding, seemed tired, almost worn. It was a side of her he hadn't seen before, and it made him feel both nervous and strangely protective. "I wanted to talk to you," she began, her voice gentle. "About the other day, in the changing room." Eli shifted slightly, unsure what she meant. "Okay," he said cautiously. "About the shirt?" She nodded. "Yes, I wanted to explain. Not because I need to justify myself, but because I think it's important you understand why I acted that way." He listened carefully, sensing that this wasn't just about a shirt or a coffee spill. There was more beneath the surface, something she wanted to share, and he felt honored that she trusted him enough to open up. "I've been managing the company for a long time," she said slowly, "and most people see me as unshakable, strong, always in control. But the truth is, I've been struggling. More than anyone knows." Eli nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue. He had a feeling that whatever she was about to say would change the way he saw her entirely. "My mother is very sick," she said quietly, her eyes glistening. "She's been ill for months, and I've been trying to take care of her while running this company. Every day, it feels like there's more to handle than I can possibly manage. I barely sleep. I skip meals. I push myself until I feel like I might break." Eli felt a lump in his throat. He could imagine the pressure she was under, the constant responsibility, the loneliness. The fear of failing both as a daughter and as a CEO. He knew what it was like to be overwhelmed, though in a different way. And he understood the weight of carrying everything on your own shoulders. That morning she continued. "I spilled coffee on my blouse before a very important meeting. I panicked because I had no time to go home and change. And then I saw your shirt. It was just there, clean and ready. I didn't even think, I just grabbed it. And in that moment, I realized how much I needed help. Not just a shirt, but someone to understand that I can't do everything alone." I felt his chest tighten. He had never imagined that lending his shirt could mean so much to someone. It wasn't just a shirt. It was a small lifeline. A moment of kindness that reminded her that she wasn't completely alone. "I didn't want anyone to see me like that," Lena said, her voice trembling slightly. "Not my employees, not my colleagues, not anyone. I try to be strong, to handle everything myself. But that morning, I just couldn't. And for the first time in a long time, I realized it's okay to accept help." Eli reached out slightly, not touching her, but showing a gesture of understanding. "It's okay," he said softly. "It's human. You don't have to carry everything by yourself." She looked at him, a mixture of relief and gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for understanding. Most people wouldn't. Most people, they see the title, the office, the power, and they assume I don't need help. I do. We all do." For the next few minutes, they talked quietly, carefully, almost cautiously, as if stepping into a delicate space that had never been explored before. Lena shared small details about her life, how she stayed up late managing reports, how she worried constantly about her mother, how she sometimes felt lonely despite being surrounded by people all the time. Eli listened, saying very little, letting her words sink in. He noticed how her voice softened as she spoke, how her posture relaxed slightly, and how the usual tension in her eyes faded. She wasn't the untouchable CEO in that room. She was Lena, a woman who was tired, human, and in need of empathy. And Eli realized that in that moment, he wasn't just listening to a story, he was witnessing trust being offered. Trust that was rare and precious. "You made me realize something," Lena said finally, looking at him with sincerity. "You showed me that even in the smallest moments, kindness matters. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be seen by everyone. Just noticing someone, just helping them when they need it. It can change everything." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. He had always believed in helping others in small acts of kindness, but hearing her say it out loud, seeing her understand it on such a personal level, made him feel important in a quiet way. Not because of his actions alone, but because he had connected with someone in a way that mattered. They sat in silence for a moment, both absorbing the weight of the conversation. Outside, the office buzzed with activity, but inside the room, time seemed to slow down again. There was no need for words, just the shared understanding of two people who had, in a brief, unexpected way, seen each other's humanity. I should get back to work," Lena said finally, standing slowly. "But I wanted to say this. To make sure you knew how much your simple act meant. It wasn't just a shirt. It was a reminder that I don't have to face everything alone, and that matters more than I can say." Eli stood as well, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't quite name. "I'm glad I could help," he said simply. "Sometimes that's all we can do, help each other, even in small ways." She gave him a small, genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and softened her usually stern features. "Exactly," she said softly. "Exactly." As Eli left her office, he felt a shift inside himself. He had seen her vulnerability, her struggles, and her humanity, and he had been trusted enough to witness it. It was an unusual, unexpected gift, a reminder that even the strongest people carried burdens, and even small gestures could create connections that mattered deeply. For the rest of the day, Eli walked with a lightness he hadn't felt in a while. He thought about Lena's words, about the quiet courage it took to admit that she needed help, and about the power of small acts of kindness. He realized that empathy wasn't just about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about noticing the people around you, listening when they spoke, and offering understanding when it was needed most. That evening, when Eli returned home to his son, he found himself telling small, ordinary stories in a new way, noticing moments that mattered, appreciating the simple acts of care he could offer, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that Lena's honesty, her vulnerability, had reminded him of something important. No matter how busy or important we think we are, everyone needs a hand sometimes, and accepting that help doesn't make us weak, it makes us human. And for Eli, that understanding, born from a spilled coffee and a borrowed shirt, would stay with him forever after that day in her office. Eli noticed a change not just in Lena, but in the way he felt about the world around him. There was a quiet connection that lingered, subtle understanding between them that had grown from that unexpected morning and their conversation afterward. It wasn't something spoken about openly, but it was there unspoken, present in fleeting glances and small gestures. A week later, something unusual happened. Eli was walking through the office lobby, carrying a stack of papers, when he saw Lena standing near the entrance. She looked different, not just professionally, but softer somehow. Her usually sharp eyes seemed gentler, and there was a small, almost shy smile on her lips as she looked around the room. When she spotted him, she waved briefly and then approached, her steps careful but deliberate. "Hi," she said softly, her voice carrying that quiet warmth he had come to recognize. "Do you have a moment?" Eli paused, placing the papers on a nearby counter. "Of course," he said. "What's up? I just wanted to check in," she explained. "After our conversation the other day, I wanted to see how you were doing, how things were going with life in general." Eli smiled, feeling the odd mix of surprise and appreciation. It was unusual for a CEO to take this kind of personal interest in an employee, and yet here she was, genuinely asking about him. "I'm doing well," he replied, keeping busy, as always. "But it's been nice, actually, to have some perspective. Sometimes life gets overwhelming, and it's easy to forget that everyone has their struggles." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Exactly. That's what I realized. Everyone has challenges, even if they don't show them. And sometimes, noticing those small things can mean more than we think." For a moment, they stood in silence, just observing each other. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was familiar now, like an unspoken understanding had been established between them. Lena shifted slightly and glanced toward the street through the glass doors. "Would you mind joining me for a quick walk outside? I feel like I need some fresh air, and I thought maybe we could talk." Eli hesitated only briefly. There was something about her tone, a quiet vulnerability, that made him feel trusted, valued. "Sure," he said finally. And together they stepped out into the crisp afternoon air. The sunlight felt warm on their faces, and the distant sounds of the city created a calm backdrop. Lena inhaled deeply, closing her eyes for a moment, as if savoring the simple sensation of being outside. Eli watched her carefully, noticing the subtle tension in her shoulders ease, the softening of her expression, and the way she seemed almost at peace in that small, ordinary moment. "I don't usually do this," she admitted quietly. "I don't usually take a walk during the day, let alone with someone from your side of the office. But I felt like I needed a break from the routine, from all the pressure, and I thought it would be nice to have someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to juggle everything alone." Eli nodded. He could understand that completely. As a single father, he had learned to manage work, parenting, and life in a way that often left him exhausted. Yet somehow he had adapted, finding moments of grace and connection when he could. "I get that," he said gently. "It's not easy. I know what it's like to feel stretched thin and like you have to handle everything yourself. Sometimes you just need a small break to breathe." Lena smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and gratitude shining through. "Exactly. That's what I've been missing, the small breaks. The simple reminders that I don't have to carry everything alone. And talking to you helped me see that." We walked together along the quiet sidewalk, talking about ordinary things at first, weather, office routines, small events in their lives. But gradually, the conversation turned deeper. Lena spoke about her mother, about the nights she stayed awake worrying, about the fear of failing both in her personal and professional life. Eli listened, offering gentle encouragement, but mostly just presence. He understood that sometimes listening, truly listening, was more important than giving advice or trying to solve a problem. "You know," Lena said, after a while, "it's strange. I've been surrounded by people for years, but I've rarely felt like anyone really noticed me, not the real me. And now, after just a few moments with you, I feel like someone actually sees me, and that's comforting, more than I expected." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. He hadn't expected to have such an impact on someone so influential, yet here it was. It wasn't about power or position, it was about simple human connection, about seeing someone's vulnerability and responding with empathy. "I think that's what everyone needs," he said softly. "To be seen, really seen. And to know that it's okay to lean on someone sometimes." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "It's not easy to admit that, you know, to say you need help. I've always felt like I had to be strong, to handle everything myself. But I'm learning that accepting support doesn't make me weak. It makes me human." Eli smiled gently. "Exactly. And it takes courage to recognize that. I see that in you every day. You manage a company, care for your mother, and somehow still show up with determination. That takes strength, but it also takes the courage to let people in when you need it." Lena looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of appreciation and something deeper. Something she hadn't admitted to herself yet. I think I've been too focused on appearing strong that I forgot how to just exist in moments like this. To breathe, to share, to connect, Eli nodded, feeling a quiet sense of understanding. He had lived much of his life in that space, juggling responsibilities, carrying burdens, yet finding small moments of connection and meaning wherever he could. And now, in this unexpected friendship with Lena, he realized that these moments were possible even for those who seemed untouchable as they walked further. Their conversation shifted again, this time to lighter topics, childhood memories, favorite foods, and small pleasures they rarely allowed themselves. Eli laughed softly at some of her stories, and for the first time he saw her laugh openly. Not the controlled, polite laugh she usually offered in meetings, but a genuine, unguarded laugh. It was refreshing, and he felt a strange sense of joy, as if this rare glimpse into her world was a gift he hadn't known he needed. "You know," Lena said after a pause, "I never expected that a small act, like borrowing a shirt, could lead to this, to talking, walking, sharing. It feels significant, even though it's just a small thing." Eli smiled. "Sometimes the smallest things are the most important. They create moments that matter, that change how we see each other and ourselves." They continued walking, their steps in rhythm, feeling the gentle warmth of the sun and the quiet hum of the city around them. Eli realized that this connection, fragile and unexpected, was becoming something meaningful. It wasn't romance, not yet, but it was a bond formed through honesty, empathy, and shared human experience. After a while, Lena stopped by a small park, the trees casting dappled shadows on the path. She leaned on the railing of a small fountain, watching the water flow. "I feel lighter," she said softly. "Talking to you, being outside, seeing things from a different perspective. It reminds me that life doesn't have to be all work and pressure. There can be moments of peace, even in the chaos." Eli nodded, understanding completely. That's the thing. Life is full of chaos, full of responsibilities, but it's the small moments that give us balance. We don't always notice them, but they're there. And sometimes it just takes someone else to remind us. Lena looked at him, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. "You reminded me. And I think I needed that more than I realized." "Thank you," Eli smiled gently. "You don't have to thank me. We all need reminders sometimes, and I'm glad I could be here to share this moment with you." For the rest of the afternoon, they stayed in the park, talking and laughing, sharing stories, and simply existing in a space of calm and connection. It was a rare moment for both of them. Away from the office, away from responsibilities, away from the expectations that had weighed so heavily on them. And in that moment, Eli realized something important. True connections weren't built on titles or positions, but on shared humanity, empathy, and the courage to be vulnerable as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm golden glow. Lena turned to him with a small, genuine smile. "I think this is the start of something meaningful," she said quietly. "Not necessarily in the way people expect, but in a way that matters. A connection that is real." Eli nodded, feeling a quiet sense of agreement. "I think you're right, and I feel the same way. Life has a way of surprising us, showing us unexpected bonds that we never thought possible." They walked back toward the office together, side by side, carrying the warmth of that afternoon with them. And while the world around them continued its busy rhythm, they had found a space rare, precious space where they could simply be human, understood, and connected. Eli knew that this bond would continue to grow, quietly and naturally, as they navigated their lives. And for Lena, the simple act of borrowing his shirt had become more than a moment of convenience. It had become the beginning of trust, understanding, and a connection that neither of them would forget. The days after their walk in the park felt different for both. Eli and Lena. The office seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating, and yet filled with possibilities. For Eli, it was a quiet reassurance that connections could form in unexpected ways, even between two people whose lives seemed worlds apart. For Lena, It was a gentle reminder that life could still hold moments of ease, laughter, and understanding, despite the pressures that weighed heavily on her every day. Eli noticed small changes in Lena's behavior over the next week. She was still efficient, focused, and commanding in meetings. But there was a softness in her eyes, a lighter step in her walk. It wasn't something the other employees seemed to notice. She was still the CEO they respected and sometimes feared, but Eli could see it. The vulnerability she had shared had stayed with her, but it didn't weaken her. If anything, it had made her more approachable, more human. One afternoon, Eli found himself working late, organizing files in the office storage room. His son had gone to bed, and the house was quiet. He liked the calm of these moments, the time to think, to breathe, to reflect on the small victories and challenges of life. That evening he received a message on his phone, one that made him pause. "Do you have time to meet tonight? There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Alone." Eli recognized Lena's number immediately. A flicker of nervousness ran through him, but it was accompanied by curiosity. He typed a quick reply, "Yes, I can. Where?" A few minutes later, she responded with a simple address, a small, quiet cafe, not far from the office. It wasn't fancy, but it had a cozy warmth that felt inviting. Eli changed into a comfortable shirt, left his office quietly, and drove to the cafe, wondering what this unexpected meeting might bring. When he arrived, Lena was already there, sitting at a small table near the window. She looked relaxed, her hair down in a casual style, a soft smile on her lips. She gestured for him to sit, and he did, feeling a mixture of anticipation and ease. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I wanted to meet somewhere neutral, somewhere simple. No pressure, no offices, no responsibilities. Just a conversation." Eli nodded. "I like that," he said. "It's nice to step away from the usual chaos." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping warm drinks and observing the quiet activity around them. The cafe was peaceful, filled with the soft hum of conversations and the clinking of cups. For Eli, it felt like the perfect space to share thoughts, unburden worries, and connect without the distractions of the outside world. "I wanted to thank you again," Lena began after a while, her voice soft but sincere. "For the other day, for your understanding, for everything. That morning in the changing room and our walk, it made me realize something important, that I don't have to face everything alone. And it made me want to share more, to open up, because I trust you." Eli felt a warmth in his chest. He had never expected this level of trust, not from someone so high up in the company hierarchy, and certainly not so soon. "I'm honored," he said quietly. "I think it's rare for people to really open up like this. I'm glad you feel you can." She smiled faintly, looking down at her cup. "It's been hard," she admitted. "Running a company, caring for my mother, trying to maintain appearances. It feels endless sometimes. I forget that it's okay to be human, to have limits, to let someone in. That's what this everything we've shared reminds me of." Eli nodded. "We all carry our burdens," he said gently. "Sometimes we pretend we're fine, or that we can do it all, but we can't. That's why small gestures, small connections, they matter. They remind us that we're not alone." Lena looked at him, her eyes glistening slightly. "You reminded me," she whispered. "And I think I've been too focused on keeping everyone else happy, on maintaining control, on being the CEO. I forgot about myself, about living, about moments like this, where I can just exist and feel understood." Eli smiled. "It's not easy to admit that, to step back and let someone see you for who you really are. But it takes courage, and I see that courage in you." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." For a while they sat in silence again, just sharing the quiet presence of each other. Eli noticed how her shoulders seemed less tense, how her eyes, usually so guarded, were relaxed. There was a trust there now, a bond that had formed over shared vulnerability in small, meaningful moments. "You know," Lena said finally, "I want to try something. I want to take some steps toward balance. Not just for work, not just for my mother, but for me. I don't want to keep living like this, tense, rushed, always carrying more than I can handle. And I want you to be part of that, in a way. As a friend, someone I can rely on, someone I can trust. Eli's heart warmed. I'd be glad, he said simply. We all need people like that in our lives. And I'm happy to be someone you can count on. She smiled, a mixture of relief and gratitude. Thank you, she said again. I think this is the start of something important. Not in a way that everyone will see or understand, but in a way that matters to me. And I hope, to you as well. Eli nodded. It does, he said. It really does. They spent the next hour talking about lighter things, memories from childhood, simple joys, little things that made them laugh. It was easy, natural, and comforting. Eli realized that Lena had been carrying so much weight for so long that she had almost forgotten how to enjoy small, ordinary moments, and he felt grateful that he could be part of helping her remember. As the cafe began to empty and the sun set, Lena glanced out the window at the warm evening light. I should get going, she said softly, but I want to do this again. I want to continue, connecting, sharing, being human. Eli smiled. I'd like that, he said. We both need that. They stood and walked outside together. The air was cool, but comfortable, the city lights beginning to twinkle. Lena reached into her bag and pulled out a small package. I wanted to return this, she said, handing him a neatly folded shirt. It's yours, clean and pressed. But it feels different now, doesn't it? That shirt? It started all of this. Eli took the shirt, feeling a mixture of nostalgia and warmth. It does, he said. Who would have thought a simple shirt could lead to this? She smiled, a soft, genuine smile. It's funny how life works. Sometimes the smallest things have the biggest impact. And sometimes it's the people who notice, who care, who make a difference. Eli nodded. Exactly. And I think we've both learned that. About kindness, about trust, about being human. For a few moments they stood there in comfortable silence. The city around them alive with movement, but in that quiet space, it felt like time had slowed. Eli realized that this was more than a friendship. It was a connection built on understanding, trust, and shared humanity. It was rare, precious, and something neither of them would forget. Finally, Lena spoke. Thank you, Eli, for seeing me, for listening, for everything. You made a difference that I won't forget, he smiled, feeling the warmth in his chest. And you made a difference to me as well, he said. Sometimes meeting someone who truly trusts you, it changes you, reminds you what matters. They parted with a gentle wave, both carrying the quiet comfort of their shared moments. Eli walked back to his car, holding the shirt carefully, thinking about how life had a way of surprising you. How the smallest acts, a borrowed shirt, a shared walk, a quiet conversation, could lead to connections that mattered more than anyone could anticipate. For Lena, that evening was a revelation. She had been reminded that she didn't have to carry everything alone, that trust and friendship were not signs of weakness, and that sharing life's burdens could bring unexpected lightness. She returned home feeling lighter, more grounded, hopeful for the first time in months. As weeks passed, their bond grew naturally. They met occasionally for coffee, lunch, or brief walks, always sharing honest moments, laughter, and quiet understanding. It was a connection that went beyond titles or positions, beyond work responsibilities. It was built on empathy, trust, and a recognition of shared human experience. Eli found himself thinking about Lena in a way he hadn't anticipated, not as a CEO, not as someone distant and untouchable, but as a person who had become a meaningful part of his life. And Lena found herself realizing that life could still hold moments of simplicity, joy and understanding, even amid responsibilities and challenges. The borrowed shirt, once just a small item of clothing, had become a symbol not of authority, not of office hierarchy, but of human connection, empathy, and the power of small acts to create lasting impact in the end. Both Eli and Lena discovered that life's true value lay not in titles, possessions, or achievements, but in the bonds we form, the kindness we offer, and the courage to show our true selves, and in each other. They found exactly that, a rare, unexpected, and profoundly meaningful connection that would remain with them forever. Eli woke up early that morning. As he usually did, the soft light of dawn spilling through the window. His son was still asleep, and the house was quiet except for the occasional chirping of birds outside. As he sipped his coffee, he thought about the last few weeks, the way life had shifted. Subtly, but significantly, since that morning in the changing room. It amazed him how a small, almost accidental moment had turned into a connection that mattered more than he could have imagined. He remembered the first time Lena had smiled at him genuinely. Not as a CEO or a figure of authority, but as a person. The vulnerability she had shown, the trust she had placed in him, had created a bond that went beyond workplace roles or social expectations. Eli felt grateful for that trust, and he also felt a quiet responsibility to honor it, to continue being present, and to nurture the connection without forcing it. The phone rang, breaking his thoughts. It was Lena. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying the warmth he had come to recognize. "I was wondering if you had some time today. There's something I'd like to talk about. Not at the office, just somewhere quiet." Eli smiled. "I have a few hours before my son wakes up. Where should we meet?" A few minutes later, she sent the address of a small lakeside park, a place that was peaceful and quiet, away from the city's rush. Eli prepared quickly, feeling a mixture of anticipation and comfort. Over the last few weeks, their meetings had become a part of his life, not in a formal sense, but as moments of understanding, trust, and connection. When he arrived, Lena was already there, sitting on a bench, her eyes on the water as the morning light reflected off the surface. She looked serene, yet there was a hint of thoughtfulness in her expression, as if she were preparing to share something important. "Good morning," Eli said gently. Approaching her, "Good morning," she replied, turning to him with a small smile. "Thank you for coming. I wanted to meet here because it feels peaceful. I thought we could talk, really talk, without distractions." He nodded, sitting beside her on the bench. The cool breeze ruffled the surface of the lake, and the quiet sound of water lapping against the shore created a sense of calm that felt rare in both their lives. "I've been thinking a lot," Lena began after a moment, her voice quiet but steady, "about everything that's happened about the last few weeks, and I realized I need to make some changes. Not just small ones, but real changes in the way I live, the way I handle things, the way I let people in." Eli listened carefully. He could see that she was serious, that this wasn't a fleeting thought or a moment of frustration. This was a decision she had considered deeply, and it mattered to her. "What kind of changes?" he asked gently. "For starters," she said, taking a deep breath, "I want to stop pretending I can do everything alone. I've been carrying so much, always striving to be perfect, to handle it all. But that's not sustainable. I want to rely on people I trust, to share responsibilities, to accept support without feeling weak." Eli felt a quiet respect for her. It took courage to admit that, especially for someone like Lena, who had always been seen as unshakable. "That's a strong decision," he said, "and it's a good one. Accepting help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Exactly. And I think you helped me realize that. Your understanding, your kindness. It reminded me that it's okay to lean on someone, to trust, to be real." They sat in silence for a few minutes, simply watching the water. The lake reflected the sky, calm and endless, and Eli felt a sense of clarity settle over him. He realized that their connection had grown far beyond that first morning. It was built on trust, empathy, and the courage to show vulnerability. "I want to do more than just survive," Lena continued, her voice quiet but firm. "I want to live fully, not just manage crises. And I want to have people in my life who see me for who I am, not just my title or my responsibilities. That includes you, Eli. I want you to be part of that journey, not just as a colleague, but as someone I trust and respect." Eli's chest tightened slightly, not with pressure, but with warmth. He understood exactly what she meant. Trust was rare, and when someone as guarded as Lena offered it, it was significant. "I'd be honored," he said simply, "and I promise to respect that trust, no matter what." A small smile spread across her face, one that reached her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than I can say." They began to talk about practical things, ways she could adjust her schedule, steps she could take to delegate responsibilities, moments she could carve out for herself. But it wasn't just about logistics. It was about mindset, about learning to accept life's imperfections and finding balance. Eli shared his own experiences, the challenges of raising his son alone, the moments of exhaustion, the tiny victories, and the lessons learned along the way, Lena said after a while. "I never thought I'd find someone who understands this perspective. Most people see only the CEO, the power, the responsibility. They don't see the person behind it all. But you see me, and that's rare." Eli nodded. "I think everyone deserves to be seen," he said. "Not just for what they do, but for who they are. And sometimes it takes a small moment of conversation, a gesture to make that happen." She looked down at her hands, then back at him. That first day, with the shirt, it was more than just a coincidence. It reminded me that human connection matters, that vulnerability isn't a weakness, that accepting help can lead to something meaningful. And it did. It led to this. To us. Talking here, being honest, feeling understood. I can't tell you how much that means to me. Eli felt a lump in his throat. He had never imagined that something so simple could lead to a bond so strong. "It means a lot to me too," he said softly. "Sometimes life gives us moments we don't expect, and we realize they change everything. This is one of those moments." For the next hour, they continued their conversation, alternating between serious reflections and lighthearted stories. They laughed at small memories, shared lessons learned, and offered support in ways that felt natural and effortless. It was rare for both of them to experience such honesty, such ease, and they cherished the time without interruptions or expectations. As the sun climbed higher, warming the surface of the lake, Lena leaned back slightly and closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. "I feel lighter," she said quietly. "Talking like this, sharing like this. It reminds me that life isn't just about responsibilities or appearances. It's about moments like this. About people who matter. About connection." Lee nodded. "Exactly. And it's important to hold on to those moments, to remember them when life gets heavy again. They keep us grounded, remind us why we do what we do, and give us strength." She opened her eyes and looked at him with a small, sincere smile. "I think I want more of these moments. I want to continue building this trust, this understanding, not just for me, but for both of us. Life has been too rigid, too focused on survival. I want to live, really live, and I want people who care to be part of that." Eli smiled. "I feel the same way, and I promise I'll be here. Not just for support, but as someone who values this connection, who respects it, and who cherishes it." For the next hour, they discussed ways to integrate more balance into her life, the small changes that could make a big difference, and how they could continue supporting each other. It wasn't about romance or drama. It was about real, meaningful human connection, a friendship built on trust, understanding, and shared vulnerability. As the morning gave way to noon, Lena stood and stretched, a look of calm determination on her face. "Thank you, Eli," she said softly, "for listening, for understanding, for being here. I don't take this lightly, and I hope this is just the beginning of something lasting." Eli stood as well, feeling the quiet satisfaction that comes from meaningful connection. "It is," he said simply, "and I'm glad to be part of it." They walked back toward the parking lot together, the conversation now light and easy, filled with laughter and shared observations. The city hummed around them, but they carried with them the quiet strength of understanding, the rare comfort of knowing someone truly sees you, and the peace that comes from being accepted as you are. By the time they parted ways, Eli felt a deep sense of gratitude, Life had a way of surprising him, showing him moments of connection that were unexpected and transformative. And Lena, walking back to her car with a newfound sense of balance, realized that trust, openness, and small acts of kindness could reshape her world in ways she had never imagined. The borrowed shirt, once just a small, ordinary piece of clothing, had become a symbol not of authority or hierarchy, but of human connection, empathy, and the power of simple acts to change lives. It reminded them both that life's most meaningful moments often start quietly, unexpectedly, and with the courage to be human. And in that shared understanding, Eli and Lena discovered something profound, that life's value isn't in titles or accomplishments, but in the trust we give, the bonds we form, and the kindness we offer, and that those things, above all, create a life worth living.